Okay, so as much as I wanted this to be just a straight video about making some ramen and eating it, I decided that I wanted to make a little bit of a tutorial video. I don't know if I cooked that long enough. I wanted to make a small tutorial video about ISO, aperture, lenses, f-stop, all the numbers that a lot of people just ignore when they're using a camera, which isn't a bad thing. It's a very basic form of like filming, and I think a lot of us would benefit a lot from knowing about each individual aspect. So I've worked on 2 short films now. I've done YouTube for a long time. I figured I might as well teach what I've learned from doing that and about each individual aspect, but very simply and very quickly, because we all have things we want to do. We have all things we want to watch. So back to the tutorial. One of the best ways I've found to learn about each aspect of this is actually using a film camera. You probably saw earlier, I grabbed the ramen, and then I grabbed the camera. This is a Sears Single X TLS. If you don't know what film is where it comes in these little canisters. It's these strips of tape, and that's what the image is burnt on. So basically, a light comes in from the lens into the camera, hits that film after the shutter, which is basically a door that opens and closes, that's right in between here. It's right about here. Right now it's closed, but when I want to take a picture and I snap the photo, it will open and then close, basically. That's the basic explanation of a shutter. Everything that we know today about like filmmaking, photography, anything like that is based on this. So if you've ever heard that term of like, ooh, film is better pictures, that's because it's analog. It's non-electronic. Most cameras nowadays have a digital sensor. This was straight on the film. The quality was dictated by the film, and there was really no resolution. You can't zoom into a film image and start seeing pixels. Motion pictures, basically, it's moving the film as you're recording. So that's what a motion picture film is. The film itself is rotating. It's going to show it, it's going to expose it, and then move to the next one. That's why it's 24 frames a second, because it's taking 24 pictures every second. Now let's talk about the dial here. So this is the lens on here. This is I consider it the most important part of a camera, is the lens. The lens is one of the most important parts, if not the most important part of a camera. Let's first focus on the focus. On the end of this, I have a little focus ring. You can turn this right and left. Now, when you have your camera set to automatic mode, it will not turn. The automatic mode, when you turn it, it will do nothing. It's because that's been disabled, because when you slightly press on the button, it will automatically focus it. Now, on this, there are different numbers in meters and feet, and as you turn it, it obviously changes. It can go from different distances. The numbers are explaining how far from the camera is going to be in focus. When I set this to 10 feet, it's going to put whatever is in 10 feet in front of the camera body. Keep in mind, it's the body, not the end of the lens. It will put it in focus. It's terrifying to use a manual lens, but you have so much more control, and you can pull the focus whichever way you want. This is my 100mm lens. F-stops, quite frankly, I don't know what it stands for. That's just what this is called. It's called f-stop. So right now, my camera is set to 1.8, and as I turn, it's going to close. Right now I'm at 8, I'm going to 11, 16, and 22. It closes the hole inside the lens and opens it. That's the function of an f-stop. It makes the hole inside of the camera, the access point through the glass, smaller or bigger. Now, why the heck would you ever want that? When it's open all the way, that's gonna bring your focal length smaller or larger. It like the background right now is a little bit more blurry than what I am right now, and if I stuck my hand closer, it's gonna get blurry. But then there's the range in between where everything stays in focus. So the smaller the hole, the larger the focal length is. So the more space you have in focus. Let's go to zoom. This lens is one of my newest. It's not the newest edition. It is 100 millimeters. The one that's running right now is 30 millimeters, by the way. That one's 30, this one's 100. The lens on the film camera is 55. And then I have two variable lenses. This is my variable lens that goes from 45 to 150. I am currently at 45 millimeters. Now I'm at 60. Now I'm 75. And now I'm at 100. I know a lot of people have used that just so then they can get closer. Like, they wanted to zoom in on an object, so then they zoom in with the lens and they start getting closer or farther away. Or they're looking at something far away and they're like, oh, I'm gonna zoom it in. Yes, that is part of the purpose of zoom, and it's confusing because it's called zoom, so obviously you think, okay, I'm gonna zoom in. That's not the entire purpose of zoom. The camera, it comes out like this, right? It shoots outwards. Like, the closer I get to the camera, the more it's gonna take up the frame because it's moving across me like this. That's how it works. So when you zoom it in, it's actually just kind of just pushing that together and capturing a smaller center of image. And that's what you're doing. So that's why I say wide when I say 45. When I'm shooting a person, I'm not gonna stick it at just like a 45. I'm gonna stick it at 100. The zoom, when it's at 100 millimeters, it will impact the image. As it gets wider and wider, it's shoving more and more information into a small center. So when you have a wider lens, you'll actually get distortion along the edge. With, like, say an iPhone, iPhones have that wide angle option, right? Problem is that the image distorts way more than we usually realize without comparison. I'll put in this GIF. There's a GIF that exists on the internet that shows the difference. When you're shooting at 100 millimeters, it actually is the most pleasing to the eye. It's the most appealing. When you look at 100 millimeters, it looks, oh, that's nice. Let's talk about ISO. ISO is the sensitivity of your film or your sensor. With standard film, when you're shooting with a physical film analog, you buy it in little boxes, and they're usually labeled 200, 400, 800, and that's the ISO. If you have more sensitive film, the number is going to be higher. So like 200 is a lot less sensitive than 400. 400 is a lot more sensitive than 200. When you're shooting at a higher ISO, it's picking up more light. So it's actually a really powerful resource you can use, because you're in a dark situation, you have your aperture open all the way, so it's letting as much light as it can. That's one of the things you can use. You can crank up that ISO with a non-film camera. My camera is currently set to 200 ISO, and I'm shooting in a dark situation. Why did I choose 200? You have to sacrifice the quality of the image every time you crank that ISO up. As the higher the ISO, the more sensitive the film is. So it's more sensitive to grain, too, because the darkness in the back is not always just pitch black. Now let's talk about that little thing that's in between. I explained it earlier. Shutter, it opens and closes. But now there's these numbers on your camera that's like 1, if you're using a Nikon, it usually says 1 over 250. What the heck does that mean? Well, that means it's out of a second. So if it's 1-250, it's 1/250th of a second. If it's 1 over 4, it's 1/4 of a second. So that means the shutter is going to open for 1/4 of a second and close. It really is just written as 250. If I set the shutter speed to 250, it's going to be taking in a lot less light, but there was going to be less motion blur. So like right now I'm shooting at 24 frames per second. What I would recommend to you is that you want to double what your frame rate is. When you're shooting a motion picture, or even a picture, you're balancing these. Let's simplify it down to just a picture. You have a triangle. You have your ISO, you have your shutter speed, and then you have your aperture. This triangle balances how you want your image. Now, that's pretty much it. That is what I would explain right now. That's how videography and how photography work. Of course, I more specialize in videography. If you know about video, you usually know about photography. They work very similar. They are hand in hand because it's called a motion picture. I shoot short films every so often. If you want to be a part of a project and learn more, then just let me know. We'll get you involved. It will get you to learn this stuff. It's really powerful to know how to do this. And it will get you jobs. When you know these numbers, you're going to be ahead of the game. You're going to beat out most people when you know how to do this. Oh, I want to make my film look like a movie. Done. Do you know that look? You can look up this. Most movies will actually have what specs they used for their film. Take a look at what other movies have made if you want to look for that look. This is something I'm passionate about, and I know a lot of you guys are too. So I believe taking the time to show you more about your passion is really powerful. It's a lot of fun. Go out there and shoot. From going out and shooting than you will from this video. You'll learn what you like. I learned that I liked ramen. That was really fun. It's kind of cold now, but here we are. I hope you guys enjoyed the film festival. I hope you learned something. So, see you guys later.